Next up, we actually have CJ Giovingo, who's going to come and talk to us about the mission to Mars in 2020. They're going to be amazing. Let's also welcome up CJ.
Thanks, that was great.
Yeah.
Hey there, how's it going? It's nice to be here with all of you today. Welcome back from the bathroom. I think most of you have made it. So my name is CJ Giovingo. I'm with the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And I'm going to, yeah, right? Jet Propulsion Laboratory, huh? I think it's the first time somebody from JPL's here, so I'm excited to represent. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my experience as a system verification and validation engineer on the next robotic mission to Mars, which is Mars 2020. But in order to tell you that story, I'm going to have to start with a more personal one first. So that's me. So as these things tend to happen, the energy and fervor with which I pursued my professional dreams began to inform my internal exploration of self, such that by the time I got to JPL, I had just started identifying to myself as trans. Now, this is the first time I had entered a professional setting with my most full integrated self, and it was terrifying and really messy and completely necessary, which is quite fitting because it's exactly how I would describe my final interview at JPL and the moment that I believe may have helped land me the job. So I had just finished my presentation to this group, and I got a question about the real reason that I left college the first time without getting a degree. So I'm used to this question, and I had a well-packaged answer all queued up, ready to go. But for the first time, I decided to just take a deep breath and answer honestly. So I shared with the group what it was like to come out as a lesbian in college and the challenges I faced trying to support myself through a degree, a NASA internship, all while working a full-time job. Now, up until that point, I'd always considered that particular time in my life to be a complete failure. But by owning this moment and sharing this with the group, I was able to show the struggle that was born from that. Excuse me, the benefits that were born from that struggle, right? So I was able to show them the lessons and skills that ultimately were able to make me a better person, and for them, a better systems engineer. Now, I haven't always succeeded, and, oh, you know what? That's a great moment. Actually wasn't what I wanted to tell you right there. But being able to tell them about this showed them why I was JPL material. JPL's motto is to dare mighty things. And it comes from the same Theodore Roosevelt quote as a book that's been really important in my transition called Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. I don't know if we have any fans in the house. Yeah. So that quote states, and I'm just going to paraphrase for you, it is not the critic who counts, not the one who points out how the strong person stumbled or where the doer of a deed could have done better. The credit belongs to the person actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who comes up short again and again because there is no effort without error and shortcomings, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if they fail, at least fails while daring greatly. Now to me, right? Yeah, hell of a quote. To me, this quote emphasizes courage in the face of uncertainty, risk-taking, and vulnerability. It also points out the perils of judgment and perfectionism while highlighting the benefits of a hard-fought journey regardless of the outcome. Now, while I haven't always succeeded, there's been a lot to learn in the trial and error. So when I first started on this mission, I had a lot of responsibilities early on, and that meant asking this large, tight-knit team that I joined to trust me, first as an engineer, and then later on as a trans person. And that's meant that I've had to learn to trust them too. I've also had to learn all over again what it's like to come out of a closet and the patience, compassion, and strength that that requires. Something that I'm sure each of you in this room knows a little bit about, right? So that's the journey that has brought me here today with you, and that's my starting place on the way to Mars. But let's talk about Mars. So, as every sci-fi movie has taught us, any epic quest requires a diverse armada of technology and people working together. So at NASA, our quest is to seek signs of past life in our solar system and to one day put astronauts on the surface of Mars. Our Mars 2020 project is the first official leg in the Mars sample return missions, which will bring a sample of the Martian surface back to Earth. Now, these are the myriad of missions that have enabled our progress to date and that will propel us into the future. So our mission, Mars 2020, is built upon the heritage design of the Mars Science Laboratory and their very successful rover, Curiosity, which is still doing some incredible science every day, more than a year and a half after their primary mission has ended. So a little bit about the structure of our mission. So we're going to launch in late 2020, and after a very quick 6 to 8 month cruise, we'll land sometime in February 2021. Now, we're going to use the same dramatic sky crane maneuver to lower our vehicle-sized rover to the ground. Current planning has our surface mission around 1.5 Martian years, which is roughly 3 Earth years. So, with all of this heritage design, what sets our mission, Mars 2020, apart? So, in addition to having improvements in hardware and software, we also have an entire new suite of instruments that we're going to use to help meet our science goals. One of those really awesome instruments is called Moxie. It's one of my favorites. Moxie stands for the Mars Oxygen In Situ Resource Utilization Experiment. We love acronyms at JPL. So Moxie is a key technology demonstration that is essential in enabling future human exploration on the planet. So what it is, it's a small box inside the rover that, in effect, breathes in carbon dioxide from the Martian atmosphere and breathes out pure oxygen. This so at JPL, it's really nice. We only work with robots, not humans. And the nice thing about that is robots don't need things like food or a waste management system or oxygen to breathe, but astronauts do. And if we're going to have a long-duration mission to Mars, astronauts will be able to use this technology to make the oxygen that they'll need to breathe or use for propellant instead of shipping it all the way from Earth, which is costly and timely, as you can imagine. One of the other capabilities that's new on our mission is something we call the sample and caching system. It's right there on the front of the rover you see in this mock-up. So this is actually a whole suite of new technologies. This system is the one that's responsible for capturing the Martian samples and then preparing them for a return trip to Earth later on. So it's actually pretty neat how this works. So the rover arm reaches up to the front of the body, and there's a bit carousel there. So grabs a drill bit, reaches out, and it cores onto the Martian surface, a geologically interesting section. And then once it's taken that core, it brings it back to the front of the rover body, and this is where things really get cool. So inside the rover is a second arm, it's really tiny, and it grabs the core from that bit carousel, and it measures the sample that we received, it plugs it, it seals it, and it stores it away in a temporary cache till later. So once we've driven around a particular region of interest, we've taken enough of these samples, then we gently, and this is a technical term, drop those samples onto the surface. We're going to be a nice little neat pile, and that way in 5, 10, 15 years, NASA decides to send the return mission back to go fetch them. So now that we have all this new technology, how do we convince ourselves that once we get to Mars, which has a different atmosphere, a different gravity, different temperature, that the system we've designed, built, and tested here on Earth is actually going to do what we intended it to do, right? Or that the workmanship and functionality of all this inherited hardware is actually going to hold up. Well, this is actually my job, which is pretty cool. So people hear testing and they think really boring stuff, but there's actually some cool stuff that happens. So because of the unique heritage design that we have, our verification and validation team has gone through all of MSL's as-run test campaign and have worked to capture the lessons learned from this effort, as well as their experience in operations, because they're still there on Mars doing great science. So we're taking all of that data, feeding it into our V&V plan across the entire flight system as we finalize the scope, schedule, and test venues for tens of thousands of items that we'll have to verify. So that's everything from hardware requirements to interfaces and software commands. So we'll do this by using demonstrations, analyses, system tests, operational scenario tests, all to verify that the system and components that we build both function and operate the way that we intend it to. Now, the pictures that you see behind me are pretty awesome. These are all tests from MSL. And one of our challenges on the Mars 2020 mission is to decide which of these tests, and there are many, many more, that we want to repeat or alter or just scrap altogether. At the end of the day, our V&V program boils down to this. It answers two questions. Verification asks, did we build the system right? And validation asks, did we build the right system? We've got about 4.5 years till launch at this point, right? 5 years till we land. So that means we have a whole lot to do. We've got to finalize our design and our enhancements. We've got to finish planning and then execute our test campaigns. And then we actually have to build and integrate this system. So we're going to face a whole lot of challenges along the way. And the way that we're going to be successful is if we meet these challenges being open in the face of adversity, we're managing our risks, and we're remaining flexible and responsive in the face of anything that we find along the way. In short, what we need to do is to dare mighty things. Thank you very much for your time.